What up, Marsh Pod? I'm coming at you. We're talking SWBA. What do the Wolves do? And we're also talking SimWorld U commitments and recruiting. This has been a fascinating recruiting season, so I wanted to dive in and did some research and was interested. So let's dive in. Let's do it. All right, let's start at SWBA, where the Minnesota Timberwolves are on life support. They have lost 3 games in which I think you walk out of all 3 of those and feel like we should have walked away with at least 2 of them. Game 2, the dagger, the game winner by Luka, and then last night the late collapse. Game 1, a late collapse as well. This has been probably the hardest to watch it. And just, you can see how close they are. You can look at the Pacers, and you can be like, yeah, they could have come out of those. But I think that the right team is up 3-0 in the Eastern Conference, right? There's no reason that the Pacers should be up 2-1. There's no reason the Pacers should be up at all. The fact that they got there, especially Game 1, it's like that's a huge missed opportunity because you don't expect them to be there. So we've got the right result. We're headed towards the right result in the Eastern Conference. I'm not convinced we're headed towards the right result in the Western Conference because Minnesota has just been great in this series. The problem is that they have no closer. They have Ant, and he's great, but they don't have a multitude of options that they can go to in the fourth quarter to put things away and get victories. The Mavericks have that with Luka and Kyrie, and the playoffs are a very weird embodiment of the game because the divide between the regular season in the SWBA and the postseason it's 2 different games. It's not that way in the SWFL. It's not totally that way in like the SWHL. Like the Chiefs are going to be the Chiefs, man. Patrick Mahomes is going to be Patrick Mahomes. It's not like you get less penalties called in the postseason in football. The game of basketball, it's officiated differently. They let a lot more. Like when you are listening to a broadcast and the commentator's like, you can't call that one in the playoffs. If it's a foul, we should be calling it. And I'm not here saying that what was called last night should have or shouldn't have been. That's not where I'm diving at. But the game is different. The way that your rotations are like 7 men. Like during the regular season, you're playing 10 dudes, right? Look at the Nuggets. They were playing, what's his name? Peyton Watson. Big minutes during the regular season. A valuable part of that rotation. Couldn't even get on the floor in the postseason. Everything changes in the playoffs in the SWBA, and on top of that, it's the way the games close. It's very, very difficult in the postseason to have game setup plays in the fourth quarter late in games because it often divulges into recreational basketball at the highest level. It's meant to be a compliment. But you look at last night, right? The Mavericks could just spam the pick and roll. And they could spam it on Rudy Gobert, and that's what I want to talk about. I don't know what the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to do with Rudy Gobert. I really don't, because they might be running out of options. He was hunted mercilessly last night by both Luka and Kyrie. But to the fact that Hardy even got an ISO, he looked to pass the ball. I think it was late third. It was 81-79. Maybe late fourth, but No, it was late third, sorry. He tries to pass the ball to Luka Doncic. He's got Gobert on an ISO, on an island, and Hardy does. And Luka waves him off, says, no, take him. He ends up driving him into the paint, puts him on skates, just like Luka did 2 nights before, and then draws the foul and gets the free throws. He is hunted every single time down. And a few years ago, we had a reckoning with the MVP award. We realized that this story-based bullcrap that we were being fed was pointless. Russell Westbrook wins an MVP because Kevin Durant dips and the Thunder stink, and yet he makes them a 6 seed. A 6 seed. That's like saying Tyrese Halliburton should have been the MVP. Nobody thinks that. Yes, he has a historic season. He has a triple-double. Awesome. At the time, I even thought he should have been the MVP. In retrospect, it was a terrible decision. It probably should have gone to James Harden that season. But that reckoning of when we realized, hey, maybe this story-based crap that we're fed and that we feed people, if they haven't won a championship, we can't keep giving them an MVP. Once they get 2, it's kind of like, all right, you reached your limit. You can't get 3. we stopped doing that. We started saying, okay, the players that are good, we have to give them the recognition that they deserve. That's allowed Jokic to continue to win MVPs. It allowed Joel Embiid to get his, as opposed to, again, like we talked about, Russ getting that one over James Harden. That argument needs to extend to the Defensive Player of the Year, because Rudy Gobert ain't the Defensive Player of the Year. We overvalue blocks and interior defense in favor of actually impactful defense. If the Defensive Player of the Year is being targeted from the moment he walks on the floor, he's not the Defensive Player of the Year. Because you're not saying, Nikola Jokic, yeah, I really hope we can funnel the ball through him, reigning MVP. If we get him the ball on offense every single time, we're good. You don't do that. But the Defensive Player of the Year, it's like blood in the water, and they're just going straight at him. Said it earlier today on SimWorld Today. We're recording this on Monday. He didn't play the first 9 minutes of the fourth quarter. 9 minutes. 75% of the fourth. Your highest paid player in the biggest game of the season on the road didn't play 75% of the biggest quarter of the season, and that's our Defensive Player of the Year? Yes, I know the Wolves didn't pay him, so if you say, well, they didn't give him that money, it doesn't matter. The point remains. They should have left him off the floor, because when they were in that quarter with Naz Reid and Karl-Anthony Towns, they were drawing even. They were taking leads. They were up, I think, at one point by 4. Naz Reid being on the perimeter next to Karl-Anthony Towns, who, granted, has been atrocious this season, allowed for a much more drivable lane. It allowed for Conley, for McDaniels to get open. It allowed Ant to crash into the paint, collapse the floor, and then kick it out. McDaniels made him pay. Conley had some good plays. Karl-Anthony Towns did not. They could switch on defense as well, and there weren't any obvious mismatches that the Mavericks could attack. You could feel on the offensive end the Mavericks seeking, right, probing to find the guy that Luka or Kyrie could take off the dribble, and they found that a lot harder without Gobert on the floor. When Gobert was in the game, that's exactly what they did. Literally the first possession back, he steps onto the floor, and immediately Luka Doncic brings Daniel Gafford up to do a pick and roll, and they force Rudy Gobert into the action. I don't know what they do. They can't trade him because no one else in the league is going to value him even close to the same that the Wolves did, and maybe not at all. And maybe this is a bad matchup against Dallas, but I can't see SGA having a drastically different time than Luka and Kyrie have had. The most obvious contract for the Wolves to move is probably Cat, but that still leaves you paying big money for Rudy Gobert, who is once again a better player when he's getting less minutes and not on the floor. And not to mention the fact that Luka just has a vendetta against him, and for whatever reason he despises him. I'm sure there's some lower reason that somebody can tell me about, but it means that time and time again Luka just wants to make the Defensive Player of the Year's life a living nightmare, and he's successfully done that for the first 3 games. And then on top of that, Gobert is 31. He's got 2 years left on his deal. The second year is a player option worth $46 million in 2025 when he will be 33 years old by the playoffs. He's going to pick that up. The Wolves are going to have to pay $46 million to an aged and more unplayable version of Rudy Gobert. The playoffs exposed everything, both good and bad. For 2 rounds, it exposed Ant as a monster, as a future face of the league, and who will be a problem for years to come. It also exposed that Gobert is still completely unplayable when you need him the most. All right, shifting gears, SimWorld U. We're diving in. We're doing a long one today, folks. Well, not long, just longer. SimWorld U commitment deadline. That has been announced as July 21st. So we're May 27th today. Commitment deadline is July 21, which means the next 2 months are probably going to be continued hecticness as we roll in. So with that in mind, I wanted to look at best class. And what I found when I started to figure out who did I think had the best recruiting class so far, I realized nobody had the best recruiting class so far, because we have seen this very, very interesting trend this season where stars and top stars is dramatic because they're in college. Top recruits are not following top recruits. Of the top 50 players, and this is going off of 24/7 rankings, so you pick your ranking service and you could get maybe a different answer, but I think the point is probably still relatively consistent. But of the top 50 players, only 3 teams have managed to get 2 recruits from that top 50 crop, again according to 24/7. Rutgers, Villanova, and Davidson. 2/3 of those nobody would put anywhere close at the beginning of the season to consider them as a top 10, let alone top 5 recruiting class. but they each have it. Rutgers has Dylan Harper, Jermaine Owens. Villanova has Justin Bell and Mugen Williams. Davidson has Benari James and Nick Hugo. Davidson, in fact, has the highest ranked duo because Hugo's ranked according to 24/7 39. I think that might be a little high, but that's still a factual thing. It's not where I would put Nick Hugo, but it's where he sits. So it's interesting that not only have we seen guys not go to Blue Bloods in the avalanche type fashion that we have in seasons past, and I think that's changed slowly over the last handful of seasons, but also guys aren't teaming up. And so for me, that leaves the best recruiting class to be Villanova or Rutgers. And I think you can make a very good case for Davidson, as we just did. Clearly, guys are wanting to play for themselves, and not in a bad way, but they want to be able to prove that they can be that guy. Otherwise, if you wanted to make the case for, let's say, Illinois or Missouri or Duke, I don't think you're wrong, right? I think we're splitting hairs over this because the question becomes, do you like more or do you like less but still good, right? So in this way, do you like getting just D'Angelo Jordan if you're Illinois, or would you rather have Justin Bell and Mugen Williams if you're Villanova? What's better there? I guess you could say getting two top-class players is better, but I'm not going to argue against you saying D'Angelo Jordan. Do you like getting just Damian Luffy if you're Gonzaga, or do you like Benari James and Nick Hugo, right? You're getting one awesome player or one awesome player and then one slightly less awesome player. Essentially, it's just that argument. Do you like one or do you like two? And maybe those two aren't as good. Benari James and Justin Bell are probably the only two from that. Well, Dylan Harper too, because he's number 2 ranked. So all three of those guys. You're getting the elite player and then the second best guy. If you said, I think D'Angelo Jordan's better than those guys, and therefore I think Illinois has had the better class, no argument. You haven't. I'm not saying you're right, but I can't tell you you're wrong. And that's what this recruiting class has become, which I think is great for the next season in SimWorld U. I think what will change this, or could potentially change this, is the futures of Arthur Lattimore and Kevon Jackson, both of whom have not committed yet, both of whom have had stops in Cascadia, which I continue to just love that parallel. Arthur Lattimore, I'd expect to stay in Texas from everything that I've been told. I would expect him to remain in Texas. Kevon, I think, is still very much up in the air. I don't think there's a real definitive order of things. I'm told he's still picking among 5 schools, and again, no real order of who he thinks among those would be the top option. So where those guys end up could very well end up being the deciding factor of, okay, that's the best class, as opposed to the one that we might stand here and say, I think it could be Villanova, Rutgers, or Davidson, just because they have 2 guys. You could look at one of these top programs that adds another one. Or maybe Villanova or Rutgers or Davidson adds another one, and that kind of separates it. So that's where we're at. 2 months is a long time, and it's also no time at all, but that's the future landscape of recruiting right now. I think it's going to be a fun end. It'll be worth the watch, and we'll see. We'll be back with you next Monday, but we'll see you before then on SimWorld Today. A couple broadcasts as well. As I said it to B-Ron, I'm very jealous of him. He gets the Philadelphia and OG's call tomorrow, but I'll be blessed to be with Sam at 8 p.m. With Southeast Select in H-Town. So I will talk to you tomorrow morning on SimWorld Today. We'll be back on here on Monday, as we always are. Happy Memorial Day. I hope you guys are enjoying it, having some time off. Thank you to any member of our service community for everything that you have done. And thank you to the family members of those service members. That is the hardest job in the world, not only to be a member of the military and serve our country, but to be a family member of one. So for all of you, thank you. For any that have lost as we celebrate Memorial Day, thank you for your service and theirs. Deeply appreciative to be in a country that hopefully continues to look after our servicemen and women for now and continues to get better at that into the future. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you then.